Morning, everybody. Want to thank you all for joining us today. I say morning. We actually have quite the global presence on our call this morning. Today, I should say. Good day. And so, we're very excited to have you all join us as we talk a little bit about how frozen peas and identity management actually have a little more in common than you might expect. This morning, we're being joined by a couple of our friends from Microsoft and from Kroger. Rob and Stefan will be joining us, and like to just share for a moment, some quick intros about who everybody is. I'm Mark Callahan. I am the head of product marketing here at Strata. And for me, it's very much thinking about where identity and my personal life intersect. I see this future state where consumer and workplace identity are going to be sort of intersecting. And so that's one of those things that makes identity really interesting, for me personally. And so, as we think about this, what I'd like to, before we do any intros, just a quick round of housekeeping. What we'll be doing is we've got an open chat window at the bottom of your screen right now as I point and hopefully directionally hit everyone. If you have any questions throughout, we'll be monitoring this channel. So please feel free to send your questions our way. We plan to have a very casual conversation today and would love to hear your thoughts and questions about experience. So please do send us your questions at the bottom. And without further ado, what I'd love to do is just go to our friends here and get a little bit about your role at your organization and maybe finish the sentence. Identity is important to me because, and with that, Rob.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Rob Lenhoff. I am a manager in our information security group here at Kroger. I've spent about the last 12 years working for Kroger, and majority of that time I've been on the identity and access management team, so it's pretty well ingrained in me now. Currently I'm a manager, so newly minted, but
Congrats.
Identity to me is very important because no matter who you are, where you work, where you play, everyone has an identity, and it's unique to you, and it should stay that way, I think.
Awesome. Stefan.
Yeah. Thanks. So Stefan de Wiele, I'm a senior program manager in the Identity and Network Access division within Microsoft. So I'm part of a team that is called the Customer Experience Team. And actually this team got created, is basically part of the new Microsoft, which basically initiated like 5, 6, maybe longer, 7 years ago, where instead of like us being in a room at the office thinking about what our customers want, we actually started to talk to customers and made them part of the process of basically building the product. So our team, we are the connection between the customer and engineering of building the product. And if I need to finish the sentence, identity is important to me because how I see it, it's the front door and the center of basically the whole IT infrastructure. And I think that's the cool part, because it's the first thing you see, but it's also that core thing that protects data everywhere around. And that makes it so, for a lot of things, it looks so small, but it is so big. And I think this is also the thing that I run into while explaining what I do for a living, is that for a lot of people, it sounds like entering your username and password is as easy as it is, but it's so much more complicated than you think, and there's so much more things. So it was a very long sentence, sorry, but
no, that was great. That was great. It's funny because I think the three of us work in a space where when we're doing our jobs well, nobody knows it. And that's the hardest part of being a marketer in the identity space, is that, again, when you're doing things right and everything's working, nobody knows it because things just work. And so it's very much that we're sort of these unsung heroes of keeping everything working as it should. And with that in mind, we tease the idea of the secret life of peas, frozen peas and identity. And Rob, as we're thinking about your experience at Kroger, as many of us are thinking about the local grocery store, it's really interesting because you have these lifelong loyalties that tend to happen between you and your local grocery store. A gas station or some other retailer just might be a matter of convenience. You stop wherever you run out of gas or wherever you might need something. But I shop at the same store that my parents shopped at because I felt comfortable and I have a loyalty there. I'd love to hear, a little bit about from the Kroger perspective, where identity plays beyond the typical places that you might expect. We talked about peas starting at the farm and going all the way to the freezer shelf. There's a lot of things that happen along the way, and there's a lot of different applications and systems that are required to make that just happen. And I'd love to hear a little bit about Kroger and the unique identity experience at Kroger.
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, Kroger, as you put it, might just be to you your neighborhood grocery store, but to me and to the rest of my team, we are I guess the country's largest traditional grocery retailer. With 2,700 or so stores and upwards of 470-ish thousand associates. And as you can imagine, with the grocery store, we have quite the well, not quite. We have a pretty fair amount of turnover. We've got the high school kids, the college kids that come in, work short stints and things like that. But we also have the distribution centers, the manufacturing plants, delivery now, and other warehouses and things like that. So every single one of those people that do some work for us, that help us get those peas from the farm to your kitchen, will have an identity, right? And they will be accessing various lines of business apps in order to provide whatever it is work that they need to complete to get the job done. It can go anywhere from like inventory apps to HR related apps, or transportation type applications, all of those types of things. But for every little bit and piece that needs to be completed, we like to know who you are and be pretty confident that you are who you say you are when you're accessing said applications that make the whole thing work. At the end of the day, yeah, kind of like how Stefan alluded to earlier. That username and password seems so simple, but it's much more than that.
So 470,000 associates. I mean, that's practically a city. If you think about it in scale, and every single one has an identity, and then multiplied times the number of apps that people have access to. Curious, can you tell us just a little background about your challenges as you were thinking through how do we modernize, and what was the previous state, and what was the nirvana state, that future state that you were looking to go to with that small city of identities practically?
Right. Yeah. So with that number of individuals out there, you can imagine there's quite the disparate types of systems that are used for authentication. Kroger wasn't always this company that had the 20 something or so different banners that they operate under. Over time, we've merged with other grocery retailers, and they have their own identities, right? So, over the years, we've done our best to try to consolidate, make it simple, selfishly make it simple, for me and my team to manage all of these accesses and things like that. But, the nirvana state, to be completely honest, is to have everything consolidated into one thing, one place where we can go to assure that I'm going to keep saying you are who you say you are, really.
Mm-hmm.
And you have access to the data that you have been provisioned to have access to. And there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes for that as well. But yeah, I guess that's why we're here chatting a little bit, along that journey, we've come to leverage partnerships with, folks like Microsoft and with Strata here. So yeah.
So I guess listening to your story, basically what you did, so looking at the landscape, and I think this is a common thing happening with mergers and acquisitions, right? Is that your landscape is starting to get very diverse. So you don't have one identity place, you have multiple ones. So I guess at some point you probably looked at how can we really make, and I'm gonna put some Microsoft marketing stuff in here, but I love this sentence, how do we make identity the control plane? How do we put it into the center and make one central IT system, right? And I guess that is probably the place where you also started looking at something like Azure Active Directory. Is my guess here. Like, how can we get everything into one database and getting control of all those users, and also like the vendors, the externals that are there as well, right? So how did that go?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And yeah, I was thinking about this a little the other day. I wish, I had like a great story how we, went out and we double and triple checked with every sort of, company that could do this sort of thing. But we had made, pretty big partnership with Microsoft, and we had been, our information type workers, been using things like the Office 365 suite, your mail, your Microsoft Word, your Excel, all those types of things, Teams. But with that being our first kind of like push into Azure Active Directory, we came to know that, this can be utilized for additional things and not just for checking your email, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
And I think then probably like you started with the identities. So I think that this is a really common thing, right? You say, okay, we're starting to use Office 365. So we got Azure AD underneath it. We got all the identities in there, all consolidated. But now we have that bunch of apps lying around, which all need like another username and password. Let's write it down because everyone forgets about it, or make it very simple. So that's probably where I guess the next journey started, right?
Right. Yeah. So
that's where we met, obviously, right? That's where we came together to talk. Was the identities had been migrated, but it's like all of a sudden you have these apps, and I mean, we were talking hundreds and hundreds of apps, right, Rob? As we were looking at that migration, how do we move those apps and modernize them?
Right. Yeah. So as a company that's been around for 100+ years. I'm not. I had to check my hand.
Before the internet was created, yeah.
Right, yeah. And throughout those years, applications have been built. Before Azure AD, things like. So we have the legacy applications. We have applications that were built in the past few years, and applications obviously being built in the future. And the way that they leverage authentication and authorization are going to vary greatly, right?
Yeah,
so with our journey in modernizing some of these legacy type applications, I hate calling them legacy. They're great applications. Yeah, they just have some legacy authentication, sprinkled on top of it. Yeah. But with those in mind, we began a partnership with Strata, and we used their Mavericks product in order to extract that authentication and authorization and marry it up with Azure AD to prove you are who you say you are, and you do have access to what you are attempting to access, and bring these legacy applications into a modern authentication world, I suppose. Yeah.
And we did it. I mean, not to toot our own horn, to a degree, but it's like, as we talked about decoupling the identities from the apps themselves, is we were able to do all this without rewriting any of those apps, right? This happened without, having to go in and refactor and recode 300 apps. This was
right. That was a big requirement of mine, because as you can imagine, you guys have been in the industry for a while. Like some of that code may or may not have been touched for quite a while. It could be some code, honestly, from some other commercial off-the-shelf type of application, that we may or may not have access to source code. But we're able to utilize this Mavericks product to lay the security on top of it. And I think the best part of it is we're using that identity that we have in Azure already. So it just seems to work. Yeah. And
and it's one of those things when our jobs are doing well, or we're doing our jobs well, it just works, right?
Right. So I'm wondering, how did that process go? Because you probably didn't did you know all the apps that were there? It sounds maybe a bit strange, but right? There's this one small department or this one small store that's using this app, but it's part of the daily business, so it needs to keep on running. Yeah. So how did you approach that? Looking like, okay, so we want to And I think security is also a great point. So I want to touch on that later. But at first, I'm very curious, like, how did you come from get all those legacy apps with Mavericks connected to Azure AD? What was the first step? What was the first thing you looked at on doing there?
Yeah. So I would say maybe we took a couple different approaches here, but
Okay.
Strata did help us out with I'm gonna botch. I can't remember. Some sort of discovery type, exercising tool that we could run. Yeah. To discover the applications that are currently in use. Because you're absolutely right. I mean, applications begin to sprawl.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't really like to admit, but we might not know exactly everything.
And you mentioned, 100-some years of mergers and acquisitions, obviously pre-internet, but even the more modern ones, they've brought all their own apps as well. So there might be some obscure line of business application that runs checkout registers at one specific banner, and yet, or maybe just in like one department of one banner, and all of a sudden you have this line of business app that maybe people didn't know about. But you have to find those, right? And hopefully we were able to help you find those apps along the way in an automated way.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That was done. Yeah. I mean, and even as like to add on to that, finding some of the extra, like policies and types of rules that we had in place for those individual apps. Whether it's, utilizing things like group membership of individuals in order to access apps, and, what sort of information are we passing to that application so they can utilize it to provide the experience that the user would expect, the personalized experience as an authenticated and authorized user would.
Yeah. So did you do any prioritization after you got the list of applications? Like, I can imagine, like with in my experience, working with customers, also helping them like modernize their apps. You probably want to look at like what is an app that does make a lot of impact, but could be like that quick win. Let's start with that and make that impact and show that we're doing a great job. But then after that, you probably want to look at like what would be next, and then the second question. So it's going to be two questions in one. But the second question, what I see a lot of times in these type of migrations, you would end up with that 20% of applications that would stick probably. So I guess you have thought about like how to do that. So first prioritization, and the second one, like how did you make sure that in the end all those 300 apps were part of that modernization? So.
Yeah. So I really like the first question. So we, as an information security group, over the years have built our own web applications for whatever, type of functionality we're trying to provide to our associates, So right off the bat, it's like we were going to convert our applications that we use first, right? And that goes from all the other members of the security team, even up to our our CISO might use those applications. So if we can convert those applications successfully and without interrupting, the business, and without one of my other big requirements was without the end user being none the wiser that something had changed, on the back end. That was the first step that we took, and that was pretty successful. So, they weren't, heavily utilized applications, or, like the applications that are actually selling the peas on the shelf, but they're important to some people, right?
Because they're all necessary, right, to get the peas on the shelf. Without them, it's that's how we, as loyal customers, find what we're looking for, and just are able to take for granted that they're going to be there, and we're just none the wiser about all the steps that it took to get them on the shelf. Especially as we think about like COVID, and things. Obviously, our entire worlds have changed. We're all talking, from our homes these days, and such. Out of curiosity, how did COVID change the experience at Kroger? And also, where did identity play a role in those changes?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure as you and everyone else here, realize, as the pandemic hit, people's shopping preferences changed like pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right? I think I mean, me personally, I was not going into the store any longer. Now we were thrust into more online ordering and pickup, and all the applications that sit behind those processes that were there before, right? We had been doing it, but maybe you didn't know about it until then. And scaling up and scaling out for those applications was something we had to quickly account for. I think from an identity perspective, it was really like a kind of like non-event, really, because we had the infrastructure and stuff there to handle it, and then I think some other people maybe felt the pain a little bit more, in technology. Right.
Yeah, but that was our goal, right? As we were working
Yeah.
together, was not just did we do the migration together, but we wanted to future-proof. We wanted to make sure that as new applications come in and new identity systems, that it could actually all be orchestrated so easily. And hopefully it made your pain a lot less than maybe some other departments, because we were able to help, with some of that process.
Right,
I have a question. Stefan, I have a question for you, actually. In a perfect world, everyone's using Microsoft products, right? That's all that exists is Microsoft, Microsoft, Microsoft. But it's not necessarily the reality, right? We love
No.
Microsoft products, but we also leverage lots of other products that are out
Definitely.
there. If somebody's going from Active Directory and they're going to migrate to Azure AD, you all have off-the-shelf software that can help make that quickly. What's the process like when somebody's looking at other legacy IDPs and they're looking to migrate to Azure AD? In your experience, that someone's coming from OAM or SiteMinder or you name it, what are the manual steps required to get there when you don't have Azure Connect to help with the move?
Yeah, and I think where you mentioned Azure AD Connect and where we talked about identities first, right? I think that's the first step, getting those identities into Azure Active Directory or that central directory there, which gives you the control, is the first step. So installing Azure AD Connect or Azure AD Connect Cloud Sync, which is a really lightweight thing to install and get your users up in Azure AD, is the first step. And then the second one is that if we're looking at app migration, and if we look at the steps that we're looking at, the first thing that we would say, like modernization, go to things like OpenID Connect or look after even SAML, which is actually 20 years old, I think, already. But still, it's modern authentication. And why do we call it modern? We can apply those security controls to those type of sign-ins. But a lot of times, and I think this is an interesting piece that Rob also mentioned, it's like old stuff. We don't have the code. We don't know how it works, and we don't know how to update it. So
we don't know who owns it, right?
Who owns it, exactly.
We don't know who owns the thing.
So it's there. It needs to be there. We need to keep on using it, but we also need to protect it, and that's an important piece. So I think the other piece there, if it doesn't fall in, so if modernization is not an option, we go to the next few options, and that basically means like how can our partners with their products help us, like doing that conversion, putting in that conversion layer, adding that conversion. And I think especially when you mentioned SiteMinder, I think the Strata Mavericks product is exactly something that we can go to customers and we see they have a lot of those applications. And we can say, yeah, okay, so you have all your identities in Azure AD. Look, we have Strata, who has a product that can do that mapping from that legacy authentication to that modern authentication. And then adding all those security controls that are in Azure AD, adding them on top of them. And I think that would be like what I would say in a perfect world where, of course, everything's Microsoft, but we still need our partners. I think that's a good thing there to mention for those specific type of things and those specific type of migrations. So that would be our approach there when we talk to customers and looking into like what is the landscape that they have.
I remember, Rob, we were looking at like the amount of time that would have taken if we had to do all this manually and actually rewrite all of those apps. And you mentioned no interruption to the user experience, right? We don't want people to know that something's happened. That means we did our jobs right. I don't want to say back in napkin math, we did like very real math, and we realized it would have been man years, developer hours, in terms of like, it just almost like it would have taken us, many years into the future trying to rewrite every single app. And through automation, with identity orchestration, we were able to do this in just, almost no time.
Right. Yeah. I don't think anyone wanted to go down that, even entertain the idea of all of the, yeah.
We had a lot more hair then, right? Before we started thinking about it.
You can tell I didn't do much app modernization or
That's the benefit of Strata,
that's the difference, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
right there.
No, yeah. So Rob, one thing that I'm also curious about, because of course the user experience, bringing everything together, brings a great so not only great user experience, but also from a management perspective, gives a lot of ease to the IT department, because they don't need to maintain all those multiple systems. It's just one system that you need to focus at. But also, what I'm very curious about, was security also one of the drivers of getting those apps like modernized and connected to Azure AD?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed the last.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if security was also one of the drivers to go into that app modernization path of those, apps using legacy authentication protocols. Let's put it like that.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I think we would like to, obviously get to an ideal state where we are not using those legacy authentication protocols, right? Yeah. And yeah, along with the new, modernization of these, the authentication and authorization, we get all these like extra bells and whistles now of, identity. Like using Microsoft additional security aspects that they have around identity, like the logging, enabling, like laying down multi-factor authentication on an application that would otherwise, the application is none the wiser, right? But we can now flick it on with a quick conditional access policy, or and also layer on additional security type thing like identity protection and whatnot, and use all of that. The one of the words I like to hear is the telemetry that's being gathered on the user behavior and whatnot. That all that information there's an abundance of it, and being able to use that to make decisions and make policies based on, because all we're trying to do here, right, is mitigate risk at the end of the day. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think especially like it's also finding that balance between end user productivity and security, right? Because you don't want a user to do a multi-factor authentication from 10 times a day, because then someone decides to build an app to auto-approve those notifications.
They do. Everyone figures out a way to work around it. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is like what I said, finding the balance, and I think what you said also around the identity protection piece, like what that looks at a risk. If there's a particular risk to this access type of piece, and then maybe take some action like doing MFA, which is not available on those legacy authentication protocols, right? It's just username, password, done, which we know is like 80+% of the breaches that are out there are based on that username, password. So that probably adds also a lot of security, but doesn't disturb that end user experience, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we have, quite a varying degree of types of users too, from our C-level suite, right, to our information workers, developers, engineers, all the way down to users in the store. And we have to make it usable, friendly, right? So we don't have people sharing passwords, things like that.
Right.
Of course. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, Stefan, and a question for you, as you think about some of the organizations that you've worked with, Rob, we heard a few of your challenges on the path to modernization. What are some other security challenges that you're hearing as customers? What are drivers that you're hearing, Stefan, as people are looking to move from legacy identity systems to Azure AD? Are there, is it a fear of being on the front page of the paper because of a breach?
Definitely. Okay. Yeah, what I said, those apps are only protected by username and password, and those are the first things that will come out. And people reuse passwords, even though we tell them please do not. Everyone does. I can say I did it in the past as well. Yeah. I at some point got a notification from Netflix saying someone in India signed into your account, and it wasn't me because I wasn't in India. But it was just I reused a password, and I use a password manager now. This is a long time ago, but just that is so important. And I think that this is also like the piece where we see a lot of customers looking what's after that password. We got MFA, which eliminates 99.9 and a little bit more nines of the attacks. when a user and password get leaked out, but you probably also want to look like further. And I think like moving those apps, making sure that they can also do those modern things. You also open the door to things like passwordless, for example, where that app that doesn't know anything about MFA, doesn't know anything about FIDO, Windows Hello, whatsoever, but because of that Mavericks connection that is in between, it doesn't have to know, but it still gets protected by it. And it's still that good end user experience. So
I got all excited there because that's like one of the parts of my job is where we're told, it's impossible to add modern authentication to certain apps, that our customers are using. And we say, well, that's the best part about having this identity fabric, layer that actually abstracts above and beyond, is that we can bring modern authentication like passwordless into those old apps that they didn't think could be protected, but absolutely must, because that's the vector for attack, in a lot of security scenarios, is that's where people are starting. And due to poor password hygiene, breach starts there, and you have that crescendo effect into other more critical systems. And so it's kind of fun to be kind of a wizard sometimes when you're talking to clients and you're like, we can help. So you brought that up. Rob, as you were looking at, the time saved, I have to do the shameless plug here. We didn't have to rewrite things, which was awesome. What did you all get to do instead? You and your team, instead of having to rewrite all these apps, hopefully we gave you hours and peace of mind back in working using Mavericks. What did you get to focus on instead?
Yeah, I would say, lots of things, the day-to-day stuff. But I'm really looking forward to, looking towards the future, I suppose, and identity and what, security wise, I mean, what are we going to do and how are we going to, just simplify some of the stuff that we're doing, some of the cloud-based things that we're doing. But I'm very interested, honestly, in one of the other things that Strata has been talking about, their IDQL standard that they're looking toward, standardizing the types of policies and whatnot that can be written to, do access and authorization, things like that across like multiple different platforms. I'm kind of looking forward to that and being a part of, the birth of that type of, standard. I don't know. I'm pretty excited about being part of that. So.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to date anyone on any of my coworkers, but Stefan, as you pointed out, SAML's 20 years old. Two of the co-authors of SAML are actually the founders of Strata, and so they we're seeing those shortcomings, and that's where we realized we needed to focus now on a new standard that really does speak to how do you handle identity policies and do policy orchestration, and that's where IDQL is definitely coming to bear very quickly here. So we're excited as well to see where that goes. I guess I have a couple of questions from the audience. I think we've touched on them, but I would love to just introduce them and just get your all's feedback. Someone had asked, with so many users and passwords and being such targets, Rob, is Kroger looking to go passwordless? I know that we hinted at MFA and others, and without giving away anything too proprietary, are you all looking at going passwordless?
I would say yes. We've been having conversations with folks from Microsoft about this, and like what the benefits are, and kind of like how I alluded to, we have different types of people that access things from different platforms and whatnot. I think we're looking into how we could best introduce that to folks that it would apply to best, I suppose. Some of our information workers and things. I mean, Stefan, you alluded to, of course, we don't want people to have to hit that MFA approve on their authenticator sometimes a day, right? Yeah. But, if we utilizing some other tools, if we can assure, I started with this, you are who you say you are. And if that is via passwordless, then yeah, of course we would use that. I mean, if we have that certainty, then yeah, of course you can access your application, depending on, the type of sensitivity of that app, maybe you I don't know, maybe there's an additional layer of security that we lay upon there, but yeah, for sure. Maybe not for everybody, maybe for some people, maybe for some apps, but
And
yeah, absolutely. I think it is the future. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I've heard, like there's studies out there, and the password hygiene and all that stuff.
Definitely.
It's all bad stuff, right?
Yeah, and I like how you touched, like, saying that there's not like one method for everyone. And that's also how we see it. And our strategy has always been like, yes, passwordless is great, but you have those different, I think personas is such a, but let's still call them personas, which which have different needs and different ways they're using IT, they're using the PC. So what you say, someone in an office has probably his own machine, his own desk.
Mhm.
Behind his machine, like Windows Hello for Business works perfectly there. But if I'm that person in basically moving around all those P's in the shop, I'm probably not behind a machine all day. I'm sharing a machine. So there are different ways there of doing authentication, and I think that's the cool thing about the nice thing about how we see passwordless. And also, the one cool thing I think for end users, which is great, is that most of the passwordless methods are MFA by default, but you don't think you do, like the multi-factor. It's you show your face with Windows Hello for Business. You sign in, and you actually did 2 factors because you have a device that you own, and it's your face that you also own. So there are 2 things, which makes it multi-factor. And I think that's makes life so much easier. But still, if you look for maybe some personas, especially in large quantities, you probably there's probably still a way to go, and that's why I think that we're at the start of the passwordless journey, right? And I think you are there as well, Rob.
Well,
I
and
completely agree.
Rob, you mentioned how many employees you all have. That again, it's a small city, and as we talk about like some of the workers in the various stores, there's a lot of turnover, admittedly, because you've got like high school kids, and you got people who are coming in like seasonal or things like this.
Mhm.
And as we think through those advanced methods of authentication, there's different degrees of technical acumen and savvy that people bring, but
Yep.
every single one of those hires probably brings a phone with them and brings ability to bring new passwordless tools with them as well. So as you think through HR mechanisms and whatnot, hopefully we have enabled you all to future-proof and bring in and continue to work with these new authentication methods.
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you mentioned the phone. Everyone, I'd say for the most part, has one of those. Yeah. But then, yeah, we have, feel like you bring your own device, and then we have some corporate devices, that we lay some additional security on as well. So yeah, and your identity should be able to traverse both of those. Like you mentioned, Stefan, the laptop and
Yep.
or the desktop in the office at the store. Those identities need to be able to work at on all of those different form factors, I guess. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Well-
and I think this also like proves that what I said, like in the beginning when you asked to finish the sentence, like
Yeah.
identity is the control plane, is the core. And that's again like where we're talking, like it doesn't matter which device, it doesn't matter which location, it doesn't matter which persona you are, there's always an identity that you need to maintain and control, and needs to be somewhere also to access all that data that is in those apps. And that's you can probably tell, but that gets me really excited. And it always makes me think about, this is really funny. We were at an identity conference, and someone did a demo on stage, basically showing that he signed in, and then everyone got crazy. And then afterwards, we were talking to each other, and we were like, "How crazy is this? The only thing you show is that you can sign in, and the whole audience goes ballistic because this is so awesome." But that is just, I think that is just a thing between identity people. It's like we're so excited about, because we know how important it is to the rest of the business and the rest of the IT.
That's it.
It's funny, that kind of reminds me of when we first met up with the Strata folks, and they wanted to do a proof of concept and show how the whole thing worked. And I don't think you're going to get any awards for best picture or most exciting thing, because it just worked. And to the non-identity people, they're like, okay, I'm signed in. Like what happened here? But to me and my team, like, oh wow, this is
what happened. It worked.
Yeah.
Right. And understanding what happened in the background was makes it all more impactful. But yeah,
Pretty
to the end user, again, there's like, I'm logged into my app, what now? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I honestly, I had my little shepherd's crook has come up because I think we're unfortunately running to time, but we could keep talking for hours on this topic. But at the bottom of the screen, folks will see a couple of links. We wanted to make sure they had a chance. We shared your perspective, from Kroger's angle, and also Stefan, you shared some of your knowledge. We shared a link to a survey that we did with 200 identity practitioners and the state of multi-cloud as people continue to adopt multi-cloud environments, and how do you support these hybrid environments? We have some really valuable information that we learned, and it was kind of like, oh, that's cool. So we put it into our report at the bottom. And there's also a link to that identity discovery tool that we worked with together on, Rob, that really helps people. You go from how do you find all the apps and the policies and everything else that's associated as you consider a migration? What if you could do it free and do it in like 10 minutes? And we're like, magic. Again, things that we geek out over that a lot of folks otherwise may not. Also stuck the link at the bottom. So we would invite folks to grab both of those. They'll also be in the follow-up email. Any closing thoughts? This was fun. I really enjoyed spending time with the two of you.
Rob, you want to go? Yeah, go first.
Yeah, I was say, this is great. This is the first time I've done something like this, but this was awesome. It was great talking to you too. And if anyone out there, wants to reach out, feel free.
Oh, awesome. Yes. Is LinkedIn probably the best way if people want to connect with all three of us? Great. We're all on LinkedIn. Yes, please reach out there. Stefan?
Yeah, and also feel free to connect with me on Twitter. I'm a little bit more active on Twitter than LinkedIn, but I do see LinkedIn messages. I really missed I want to say chatting like this about the one thing that we're all passionate about. And one thing I think it's also really cool hearing from Rob, like his experience and the things that were on his mind, and how technology could help modernize all the things and put identity there as the control plane. It's I think it's really awesome how this all work together, basically the three of us. It's Strata, it's Microsoft, it's Kroger, and together we made sure that a lot of people are way happier with their experience, and that Kroger is way more secure with the capabilities of MFA to those type of apps, and of course the path to passwordless.
You're gonna make me blush. I love it. Yeah, this is great. Well, yes, it was. It's like the best date ever. This is great. I really appreciate y'all joining us today, and look forward to more of the same. Again, please feel free to reach out to all of us on LinkedIn, Twitter as well. Feel free to grab those links below. We love to give free things. And with that, thanks for joining us today. Look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
See y'all.